I want to thank God for using someone in this church to bless me with $100.
What? Pastor Elvis, why is this widow thanking God for $100 when I gave you $1,000 for her?
Brother Richmond, let me explain.
Nobody thought one widow's testimony would destroy 15 years of ministry in less than 15 minutes.
Hear me out, please.
A quiet woman standing before the congregation, holding a microphone with trembling hands, thanking God for a blessing she believed had saved her children from hunger. Pastor Elvis was one of those men. For over 15 years, he stood behind that pulpit with the confidence of a man who believed God had chosen him above others. His church was full, his name was respected, but on one particular Sunday morning, something was different. The service had started like every other service. The choir sang. The ushers smiled. The offering was collected. And Pastor Elvis stood at the pulpit, confident, composed, and completely unaware that the next few minutes, everything he had spent 15 years building would strip away with a simple testimony from a poor widow. Then it happened. A woman stood up. A quiet woman. A woman most members had never paid much attention to. A woman in a simple dress, with tired eyes that still somehow carried faith. She walked slowly to the front of the church, took the microphone with trembling hands, and began to speak. What she said was innocent. She was not accusing anyone. She was not angry. She was simply thanking God. But those few words of gratitude hit the church like a thunderclap. Because sitting 3 rows from the front was a man who had heard enough. And at the back of the pastor's mind, a secret he thought was safely buried began clawing its way to the surface. Within minutes, men and women who had sat in that church for years began rising from their seats, not to worship, not to give an offering, but to walk out. Pastor Elvis stood at the pulpit, the same pulpit he had commanded for over a decade, frozen. His mouth opened but couldn't speak. His eyes the room, and found only disbelief staring back at him. The church he had built was emptying before his eyes. How does a man lose everything in one Sunday morning? How does a ministry that took 15 years to build collapse in 15 minutes? The answer is not complicated. It began with a widow, a prayer whispered in the dark, and 2 envelopes that a pastor should never have opened one. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share to bless others. Now let's continue the story. To understand why this story matters, you first have to meet Martha. Martha lived in a single room with her 2 children, Peter and Paul. There was no husband, no family nearby to call on, no savings tucked under the mattress, just a mother, 2 boys, and the kind of silence that only settles in a home where worry has moved in permanently. Every morning, Martha woke up before her children, not because she had things to prepare, but because she needed a few quiet minutes to gather the strength to face another day she wasn't sure she could survive. That evening, she sat at the edge of her bed and spread 3 pieces of paper in front of her. A rent reminder, 2 months overdue, a food debt notes from the shop down the road. The shopkeeper had been patient, but his patience was running thin. And a school fees notice. Peter and Paul were close to being sent home. 3 pieces of paper, 3 different debts, and 1 woman with nothing in her hands to answer any of them. Peter and Paul were finishing the last of the rice she had stretched for 2 days.
Mom, are we having more food tonight?
Go and sleep, baby. Tomorrow will be better.
When the children were asleep, Martha allowed herself to feel what she had been holding all day, and then she did the only thing she had left to do. She prayed. There is a kind of prayer that never makes it into church program. It is not prayed behind a polished pulpit. It carries no performance, no audience, and no applause. It is the prayer of someone who has run out of every other option, and those are often the prayers that travel the farthest. Martha did not pray with eloquence that night. She did not quote long scriptures or call on the names of angels. She simply opened her mouth and let the pain speak for itself.
God, I am not asking for too much. I know there are people suffering more than me. But please, don't let my children suffer because I have no one. They didn't choose this life. They didn't ask to be hungry. Please, Lord, just this once, let someone remember us.
She stayed on her knees until the words ran out. Then she remained there in the silence, not because she had more to say, but because she was not ready to get up and face the same empty room again. Faith, for Martha, was not a feeling. It was a decision she made every night when feelings gave her nothing to hold on to. She chose to believe that someone, somewhere, was listening. She did not know that on the other side of the city, in a bedroom nothing like hers, a man was being woken from his sleep by something he could not explain. Richmond was awake, and he did not know why. Richmond was not the kind of man who ignored what he felt in his chest at 2 a.m. He had built his business through discipline, his reputation through integrity, and his faith through years of learning to tell the difference between his own thoughts and something greater nudging him from within. So when he sat up in bed that night, wide awake, no alarm, no noise. He did not reach for his phone. He sat still. And he listened. A name came to him. Martha. He had seen her in church, sat a few rows behind her, perhaps. Noticed the simple dress, the two young boys beside her, the way she always arrived early and left quietly. She was the kind of person a busy church could overlook for years without meaning to. But tonight, her name sat heavily on Richmond's heart and refused to move. He had already been thinking about the church building project. Pastor Elvis had presented the vision 3 Sundays in a row. A new auditorium, more space, more capacity to reach more people. Richmond had decided he would contribute $5,000. It was a sum he had already settled in his heart. But tonight, something told him that was not the only giving he needed to do. He picked up a pen. On the first envelope, he wrote $5,000, folded neatly inside, for the building. On the second envelope, he wrote one word, Martha, $1,000. Every cent of it meant for her. Not because Richmond knew the full details of her struggle. Not because anyone had told him how empty her food container was, or how many times she had read those 3 debt notices under her mattress. He simply felt that it was right. And Richmond had learned, at great cost over many years, that when something feels that right in the middle of the night, you do not negotiate with it. By morning, Martha's name was still the first thing on his mind. He dressed early, drove to the church, and asked to see Pastor Elvis before the week got busy. He had 2 envelopes in his jacket pocket, and he trusted, completely, without any reason to doubt, that both of them would reach exactly where they were meant to go. Pastor Elvis was a man who valued appearances. His office reflected that. It was the office of a man who understood that leadership, in many ways, was a performance. Richmond walked in with the ease and greeted Pastor Elvis with a firm handshake and sat down without waiting to be invited. Not out of disrespect, simply because Richmond was the kind of man who was comfortable everywhere he went. They exchanged pleasantries briefly, the weather, the last Sunday service, the growth of the church, and then Richmond reached into his jacket pocket.
Pastor, these $5,000 is for the building project. Use it however the committee sees fit. But this envelope is for Martha, the widow with the 2 boys. I felt led to bless her specifically. Please make sure she receives every dollar of it.
Pastor Elvis smiled. It was the smile of a man you could trust your deepest secrets with.
Brother Richmond, God bless your generous heart. I will personally make sure Martha receives it. You have my word.
Richmond nodded, shook hands again, and left. He walked back to his car with the lightness of a man who had obeyed what was on his heart. His part was done. He had been faithful with what he felt called to do. What happened next was no longer in his hands. Pastor Elvis sat alone now, both envelopes on the desk in front of him. He picked up the first one, $5,000 for the church. He held it with the ease of a man handling figures he was accustomed to. Then he picked up the second one. He turned it over slowly in his hands. Martha's name stared back at him. $1,000. For a widow. He should have placed it in his safe immediately. He should have called Martha that same afternoon and handed it to her with a blessing and a prayer. That is what a shepherd does. But Pastor Elvis sat there a little too long, and in that silence, something else began to speak to him. It was Evelyn. Evelyn had a way of reading a room before she fully entered it. She noticed the 2 envelopes on the desk immediately. She noticed the way her husband's hand rested on the smaller one, and she noticed the look on his face. Not guilt, not conviction, but hesitation. To a woman like Evelyn, hesitation was an invitation.
Martha? The widow with the small boys? How much did Richmond give for her?
$1,000.
Elvis, the church roof fund is still short. The generator needs servicing. The choir has been waiting 3 months for new robes. We carry so much and nobody sees it. Give her something small. She will still be grateful. She will still thank God. She doesn't even know what was sent for her. $100 is still a blessing to a woman like Martha.
That was the moment. Not the moment he took the money. The moment before it, when he heard wrong counsel and did not stand up and walk away from it. Evelyn had not screamed at him. She had not threatened him. She had simply repackaged greed in the language of church needs and reasonable logic, and handed it to him like it was wisdom. And Pastor Elvis, a man who had preached about the love of money destroying men from that very pulpit, sat there and received it. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself the church needed it more. He told himself Martha would still be blessed with whatever remained. Men who steal rarely call it stealing in the moment. They call it borrowing. They call it redirecting. They call it wisdom. Evelyn left the office as quietly as she had entered it. No argument, no drama, no second thoughts visible on her face, just the soft click of a door closing behind her. And in that office, with a locked drawer and a sealed envelope containing $100, Pastor Elvis had just become something he had never once preached he would be. A man who stole from a widow. The devil rarely comes with fire and noise. Most of the time, he comes in the quiet voice of someone standing right beside you. Wearing a church dress, closing the door softly on the way out, Martha received the call that same afternoon. The pastor's secretary told her simply that Pastor Elvis would like to see her at the church office. Nothing more. Martha did not question it. She never questioned a call from the pastor. She changed into her best dress, the one she kept for Sundays and important occasions, and walked to the church with the quiet hope of a woman who had learned not to expect too much from life. Pastor Elvis was ready for her. He had rehearsed what he would say. He had arranged his face into the expression of a generous bearer of good news. He gestured for her to sit, asked about her children, commented on how faithful she had been in church attendance. Small talk, the kind that fills space before a lie needs to be delivered. Then Pastor Elvis folded his hands on the desk and leaned forward slightly. A gesture he had learned made people feel he was being sincere.
Sister Martha, God has been watching you. Someone in this church, they asked to remain anonymous. They felt led to bless you. They gave you $100. I have removed the tithe, as is proper before God. So this $90 is yours. Use it well, and keep trusting the Lord.
Martha looked at the envelope. Then she looked up at Pastor Elvis. And then she did something that should have made the ground open beneath that desk. She smiled.
Thank you, Pastor. God bless whoever remembered me. God bless them.
She took the envelope with both hands, the way people receive things they consider sacred. She held it against her chest for just a moment before placing it carefully into her handbag. $90. She had no idea it should have been $1,000. She had no reason to doubt the man sitting across from her. This was her pastor, the man of God, the shepherd. And so, she stood, thanked him again, and walked out of his office carrying $90 and a heart full of gratitude for a blessing that had been robbed of $900 before it ever reached her hands. Pastor Elvis watched Martha leave from his office window. She was smiling, and that smile made him feel safe. He told himself she was thankful. He told himself she had received a blessing. He told himself nobody would ever ask questions about money that only 3 people knew existed. But that was where he was wrong. Because the same God Martha thanked quietly in that office was the same God who had woken Richmond at 2 a.m. And when God begins something, no man can cover it with lies. She walked to the shop where she owed the food debt and placed a portion on the counter without being asked. The shopkeeper looked at her, then at the money, and nodded slowly. It was not enough to clear the debt, but it was enough to say, I have not forgotten. I am trying. She could not pay the rent. Not yet. She could not settle the school fees. Not with $90. But she could feed her children tonight and tomorrow and perhaps the day after. And for Martha, that was not a small thing. That was everything. Paul watched his mother serve the food with the serious concentration of a 7-year-old who understood in his own small way that this meal meant something. Later that evening, she sat with Peter and Paul and spoke to them the way she always did. Honestly, simply, in the language of faith.
God used someone to remember us this week. We are going to church on Sunday, and we are going to thank him publicly, so he knows we did not take it for granted.
She did not know the name of the person who had blessed her. She did not know the full amount that had been sent. All Martha knew was that God had heard her prayer in the dark, and on Sunday, she was going to say thank you. But what Martha did not know was that Richmond would also be sitting in that same service. She had no idea that her testimony, innocent, grateful, was about to become the most important thing said in that church in 15 years. Sunday morning arrived the way it always did at Pastor Elvis's church. Bright, busy, full of the kind of energy that made visitors feel they had found something special. Ushers stood at the doors in matching uniforms. The choir warmed up behind the stage with voices that could genuinely move a crowd. Everything looked exactly as it always had. Perfectly arranged, carefully managed, beautifully performed. The auditorium was filling fast. The worship team led the congregation through 2 opening songs, the kind that got people on their feet, hands raised. The atmosphere was electric. Pastor Elvis sat in his pastoral chair to the side of the pulpit, watching his congregation with the satisfaction of a man surveying something he had built and was proud of. He looked relaxed. 3 rows from the front, Richmond sat quietly. He had arrived early, as he always did. He greeted those around him warmly, bowed his head during prayer, and sang during worship. Richmond was not a man who performed faith. He simply lived it. Near the middle of the auditorium, Martha sat with Peter and Paul on either side of her. Martha sat between them with her handbag on her knee and something quietly radiant on her face. She had come to say thank you, and she was ready. The service moved through its program. Announcements were made. The offering was collected. A short sermon was delivered. Ironically, on the topic of integrity, Pastor Elvis preached it with the full force of a man who believed every word he was saying. Then, as was tradition in that church on the last Sunday of every month, Pastor Elvis smiled at the congregation and made the announcement that would change everything.
Before we close today, we are going to open the floor for testimonies. If God has done something in your life this week that deserves to be celebrated, don't be shy. Come and declare what the Lord has done.
Hands went up across the auditorium. 3 members testified before Martha. 1 had received a job offer. Another had recovered from an illness. A third thanked God for a safe journey. The congregation applauded after each one. Pastor Elvis nodded and smiled after each one. And then, a quiet woman in a simple dress stood up slowly from the middle of the auditorium. Pastor Elvis did not lose his smile immediately. He saw Martha walking forward and felt nothing more than mild pastoral warmth toward a faithful member about to share a blessing. He had completely forgotten that the blessing she was about to describe was one he had tampered with. Pastor Elvis did not know that the same service he had planned and prepared and preached in would become the service that ended his ministry. The microphone was now in Martha's hands, and heaven, it seemed, had been waiting for exactly this moment. The auditorium was warm with the kind of collective goodwill that fills a church after a moving service. People were still smiling from the last testimony. Nobody, not one person in that building, had any idea that the next 60 seconds were about to rewrite everything. She cleared her throat softly. And then, Martha, a woman who had never sought attention, never demanded a platform, never asked for anything more than for her children not to go to bed hungry, began to speak.
I want to thank God first, because He is the reason I am standing here. This past week was very hard for me. I will not go into details because some things are between a person and God.
But I want this church to know that I was at a point where I did not know what to do or where to turn. And then God used someone in this church to bless me with $100.
What?
I don't know who you are,
Jesus Christ!
but may God bless you. May He return it to you 1,000 times over.
It was a beautiful testimony, honest, humble, unrehearsed, the kind that reminds a congregation why faith matters. Richmond sat very still. His mind moved quickly and clearly, the way a businessman's mind does when numbers do not add up. He had given Pastor Elvis $1,000 for Martha. He had said it clearly. He had handed it in a separate envelope with her name written on the front. And this woman, this widow standing at the front of the church, thanking God with everything in her, believed she had received $100. Pastor Elvis, the congregation, his face was composed, pastoral, warm, but when his eyes accidentally met Richmond's gaze across that auditorium, something shifted. Richmond had been in business long enough to know what a guilty man looks like in the moment he realizes he has been found out. He had seen it in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in the faces of people who thought their secrets were sealed. He recognized it immediately. Martha finished her testimony and walked back to her seat between Peter and Paul, completely unaware of what her words had just ignited 3 rows in front of her. The congregation was still applauding. Pastor Elvis raised his hand to acknowledge Martha's testimony and opened his mouth to transition to the closing prayer. But before he could speak a single word, Richmond stood up.
Pastor, may I have the microphone, please?
It was not a request anyone in that building could have ignored. Not the ushers, not the congregation, and not Pastor Elvis. The moment had arrived, and it had arrived wearing the face of a quiet, generous man in a clean suit, holding out his hand for a microphone that Pastor Elvis never imagined he would have to surrender. The usher looked at Pastor Elvis. Pastor Elvis looked at Richmond. And the congregation looked at all 3 of them, sensing, in that collective way that crowds do, that something unrehearsed was happening. Something that had not been planned in any order of service. The applause had died completely now. The room was still. Richmond took the microphone with the steady hands of a man who was not angry. This is important to understand. He was not shaking. He was not raising his voice. He was not performing for the crowd or looking for a reaction. Richmond was simply a man who had given his word to a widow through an envelope, through a pastor, through a moment he believed was guided by God, and that word had been broken. And he was going to say so. Richmond turned to face the pulpit, where Pastor Elvis now stood, no longer sitting in his pastoral chair, wearing the expression of a man trying very hard to look untroubled.
I want to first honor Sister Martha for her testimony. She is a woman of genuine faith, and I have nothing but respect for her. But I need this church to hear something, because what I just heard does not match what I know, Pastor Elvis. I came to your office this week. I gave you $5,000 for this church building project, but I also gave you a separate envelope with Martha's name written on the front. It contained $1,000. I placed it in your hands personally. I ask you, personally, to make sure she received every dollar of it. She just stood before this congregation and thanked God for $100. Pastor Elvis, why is this widow thanking God for $100 when I gave you $1,000 for her?
Brother Richmond, let me explain.
No, Pastor. Explain to the widow. Explain to this church. Explain to God.
3 words. Explain to God. They fell on that auditorium like stones dropped into still water, and the ripples moved outward instantly, reaching every corner of the room. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The choir sat frozen. The ushers stood against the walls like statues. Even the children in the front rows seemed to understand that the air had changed. This was the man who had preached on integrity that very morning. This was the man who had told his congregation that God sees what is done in secret. This was the man who had stood in this pulpit for 15 years and asked people to trust him with their tithes, their offerings, their pain, and their prayers. And now he stood before all of them, unable to produce a single sentence that could explain why a widow walked out of his office with $90 when $1,000 had been sent for her. There are moments in life when silence says everything that words cannot. This was one of them. The church that Pastor Elvis had built was about to make its verdict known. Not with noise, but with the sound of feet, and he begins to walk toward the exit. Richmond walked. 1 step, then another. Steady, unhurried, inevitable. And then, like a tide responding to the pull of the moon, the church began to move with him. Then a family in the middle section stood, then 2 young men near the back. Then a group of women from the choir who had quietly removed their robes and folded them over their seats. One by one, row by row. Not in anger, not with shouting or chaos. Just the quiet, dignified exit of people who had come to worship God and had discovered that the man they trusted to lead them there had been picking the pockets of widows along the way. Pastor Elvis spoke.
Please, brothers and sisters, I can explain, please. Don't go for Christ's sake. Hear me out, please.
But the people who had trusted him kept walking. Because there are some explanations that arrive too late, when a man has already shown you what lives inside him. Not in his sermons, not in his prayers, but in what he does when the door is closed and the money is on the table, there is very little left to explain. Evelyn had told her husband that Martha would still thank God for whatever she received. She had been right about that. She had not anticipated that the Thanksgiving would be the very thing that brought everything down. Within 20 minutes of Richmond standing up, the church was almost empty. A building that had held over 1,000 people on Sunday mornings for 15 years sat hollow and echoing, with nothing but empty seats and a pastor who no longer had a congregation to stand before. He stood there for a long time, not because he had something to say, but because he did not know how to walk off a stage that had just swallowed 15 years of his life. The suit was still pressed, the shoes were still polished, the leather Bible was still on the pulpit in front of him, but the man who had stood behind it, the respected, trusted, chosen man, had been revealed for what he truly was. Not by an enemy, not by a rival, by a widow's thanksgiving. Richmond did not leave the matter incomplete. That same afternoon, he went directly to Martha's home. He sat across from her at the small table where Peter and Paul did their homework, and he told her the truth, calmly, carefully, without unnecessary detail. He placed the full amount on the table.
This is what was always meant for you, Martha. Every dollar of it. I am sorry it took this long to reach your hands.
She did not ask questions about what had happened in the church. She did not speak about Pastor Elvis by name. She simply folded her hands over the money on the table, bowed her head, and prayed. That evening, Martha paid her rent. She cleared the food debt at the shop down the road, fully, completely, with a quiet thank you to the shopkeeper who had been patient. She set aside school fees for Peter and Paul. And when the children slept that night, she knelt beside the bed again, the same spot where she had cried in the dark just days before, and she thanked God. Not for $100, not for $90, but for the truth that found its way to her anyway. On the other side of the city, in a large church building now dark and locked on a Sunday evening, Pastor Elvis sat in his office alone. The drawer was still locked, the $900 still inside. But the thing that money was supposed to protect, his image, his legacy, his ministry, was gone. Moral lessons. This story teaches us that God may be silent for a season, but he is never blind. Martha cried in the dark when nobody saw her. She prayed when there was no food in the house, no money for rent, and no one to call for help. But what men ignored, heaven recorded. Her tears did not fall to the ground unnoticed. Her prayer traveled farther than her voice could reach. It also teaches us that integrity is not proven in the pulpit. It is proven when nobody is watching. Pastor Elvis could preach about righteousness, holiness, and honesty, but the real test came in a quiet office, behind a closed door, with money on the table and a widow's name on an envelope. Many people can look faithful in public, but character is revealed in private. This story reminds us that greed is dangerous because it never introduces itself as greed. It often comes dressed as wisdom, but whenever we take what was meant for someone vulnerable, no explanation can make it holy. Another lesson is this: never take advantage of people just because they are humble, poor, or quiet. Martha did not know how much was sent to her. She did not fight, she did not accuse anyone, she only gave thanks. But the fact that someone cannot defend themselves does not mean heaven will not defend them. The weakest person in the room may have the strongest case before God. We also learned that one small act of dishonesty can destroy years of respect. Pastor Elvis did not lose his church in one day because of money alone. He lost it because the money revealed the truth about his heart. Reputation can take years to build, but when trust is broken, it can collapse in minutes. Richmond's role also teaches us that when God places a burden on your heart to help someone, obey it. He did not know Martha's full pain. He did not know her children were hungry. He did not know school fees and rent were waiting. But he obeyed the quiet instruction in his spirit. Sometimes your obedience is someone else's answered prayer. And finally, this story teaches us that truth may be delayed, but it cannot be buried forever. The money was hidden in a drawer, but the truth was already moving. The pastor thought the matter was closed, but heaven had scheduled a testimony. Martha stood up only to thank God, but her gratitude became the key that opened the door of exposure. So do not build your life on image while your heart is decaying in secret. Do not use God's name to cover greed. Do not steal from the people you were called to protect. And never forget that the God who hears sermons also hears the cries of widows. Because in the end, it was not a rich man's anger that brought Pastor Elvis down. It was not a committee meeting. It was not an enemy. It was the thanksgiving of a poor widow. And when heaven decides to defend the innocent, even a simple testimony can shake a whole ministry to the ground. Let me know in the comments section what you learned from this story. So let me ask you, was Pastor Elvis right to reduce the money because he believed the church also needed help? Should Martha have kept the blessing private, or was she right to testify before the congregation? And if you were Richmond, sitting in church and hearing Martha thank God for only $100, when you gave $1,000 in her name, what would you do? Let me know where you are watching this from. Thanks for watching, and God bless you if you share this story with 3 people. Please subscribe to get notification when I upload my next story. Like, comment.
Please, who is there? I'm coming.